hard time. The Noam Chomskys of the world are going to have a hard time because their paradigm is limited, but their limited paradigm has caused a great deal of grief with people. It's created a dialectic. It's created the division. I'm not just blaming this on Noam Chomsky, but I'm talking about the intellectuals and
killed curiosity.
Academia. Yeah, it's killed it. It's made it the new religion. Academia and science is the new religion, and that has got to change. I think that's the most positive thing that contact can do, and that is what scares the working groups, is how the power structure, or how the lower to middle tiers, okay, just below that, are going to deal with that change. And that's the meltdown factor. But anyhow, Carrie, what were you going to say?
Well, I just want to say here, and, we've kept you guys for a really long time. So,
well, wait a minute here, because I've got a couple of questions which I have been answered.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I just want to say that just to end this part of the discussion, I want to say that, we unequivocally would agree with you. That's the whole point of our existence, is to make people aware, not only that ET is here, actually, the contact is happening. And we do appreciate that you want worldwide contact in an unequivocal manner. And there's nothing wrong with wanting that. But we would be in agreement with that. That would be a great thing in theory. But I have to get back to all the other levels that we're aware of. And I think that what we're talking about is something a lot bigger than it's not. It's just a lot bigger. And
well, sure it is. But the question I want to ask you, Carrie, is that do you want contact?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Yes.
Okay.
There's no choice about it. It doesn't matter to me if it's your crystalline life form or it's
doesn't matter to us either.
No, it doesn't matter either. No, I don't care if it's the conformers. I don't care if it's
I'm going to be
all white.
An equal opportunity.
Let's just get it on the table.
I'm going to be
not alone
equal
in here.
Opportunity, contact in general person. However, I think that you have to deal with the fact that, you see, what we're really doing is we're joining a galactic community. And the operative word there is community. What it means and what that means about contact is that contact will not be narrowed down to one race. And because of that, you have a complex general contact thing happening or going to happen. And that's where the one-upmanship, the power plays, and so on that go on between the ETs, to say nothing of what goes on with the humans. But all I'm doing is throwing that into the mix, because I think you have to realize is that it's just not so easy that among those ET groups, some agreement is going to be reached on who gets to be the first guy in line.
Well, I tell you one thing, and then just to add to that, Carrie, is that can you imagine if they put a reptilian out there?
Exactly.
No. We've thought about this. I personally think, but logistically it's impossible to have a conformer because obviously the environment. How do we get a camera in a very, very hot environment? It's not going to survive. How do we get it out of its biosuit so they can see it in its natural form? That's a problem. So logistical and technological problem. Can it be done? I think so. But the point is that we need to know for sure as a species that we're not alone. And I think that's the first important step. And it cannot be questioned, and everybody must get it. And I think once we take that very small, important step, which would be very large to humankind, I think that's going to be a very positive thing. I think we're at that stage in the development, and I think that needs to happen.
I think Bill wanted to ask a question.
Go ahead, Bill.
It's certainly clear that one of the things that you both want to use this platform and have used other platforms for is really to beat the drum about open contact, and knowing that some people, and maybe some non-earthly people, will be listening to this and paying attention because you're arguing a case. And it's an intelligent case to me, and I can understand the intelligence behind it. Why would not our ET friends, who are highly intelligent, not also evaluate this in the same way and say, okay, you know what, I'm going to make it easier for these guys, we're going to force the issue. It's going to be cathartic, whatever happens, so here we go, big ships over every city. Why don't they do that?
I don't think we have enough information at this point to answer that question.
But it's an interesting question, isn't it? Because if it seems like an intelligent proposal to you and to us, to a species of even higher intelligence, they must also have thought of this. And if they're not doing it, there must be a reason why they don't.
Here's a thought. I want to just pose this to you, and I I think, Shawn, it was your observation, but if the Greys weren't abducting people, okay, which, don't get me wrong, we don't condone that. We believe in free will in every sense of the word. But if the Greys weren't abducting people, would the UFO ET phenomena be on the radar that in such a way that it
is now?
Yeah, it is now. In other words, if they weren't abducting, would we really know about this phenomenon? Because most people's idea of an ET is a Grey.
Yeah. You're just saying that that's a particularly interesting way of attracting attention to the phenomenon.
You know, it's the old saying, and is bad publicity is good publicity.
Yeah, sure.
And it's interesting that because of the abduction phenomenon, we do have a degree of understanding about at least one race and one race's design, and that we're not alone.
Yeah. Let me propose another idea to you, because it's going to be problematic trying to get a camera in front of an extremely hot crystalline life form that isn't going to look like anything other than a special effect anyway. And it's going to be scary for people to look at an 8-foot-tall miniature T-Rex with big teeth that kind of doesn't particularly look very friendly or very humanoid. If there are other races around which are more humanoid, who are in some way in agreement with this whole push, and there's a lot of evidence, a lot of circumstantial evidence to suggest that there is, why don't those guys come forward first as being the most camera-friendly group from outside of this planet to make a representation, and then say, oh, by the way, there's some other guys and they don't look quite like us?
That might happen, but I got to tell you, I think what would resonate with people, and I think that's important, that we have that representation or something that's more human-friendly to our perception. But I know one thing is that I know the science community would be rocked on its ear if they got a look at an intelligent silicon-based life form. I mean, that would take the ambiguous right out of it. Now, that may be limited, maybe 100 people or 200 or 300 going and seeing and interacting for maybe a short period of time. Say, okay, and they all come out and say, yeah, this is intelligent, this is real. It'd have to be a cross-section of representation.
That could easily happen behind the scenes anyway, couldn't it? It's really PR that's the problem, isn't it?
No, I understand that, but I'm saying at the point of contact where we have contact, but then we have an interaction. And we may have the tall white, a human-friendly form that's interacting, but I still think that we need to see more. And not for nothing, the reptilian may be a very difficult problem, but a conformer or even a Grey.
Well, let me ask you guys a question. What form would freak you guys out?
Do you mean personally? You mean as a personal question?
Yeah, if you were to interact with an ET, what form would you go, oh, yay?
Oh, probably something that looked like it was going to hurt me. Because that's a very primitive response that we've all got inside us, some kind of big animal.
What's your answer?
I guess it would be the reptilian for that reason.
Our guy, when he first saw one, went, he didn't panic, but he was completely... How
about you, Carrie?
Yeah, I mean, you got to say T-Rex. You're talking about a dinosaur. So humans have an inherited memory.
I agree with Shawn. The insectoid
would freak me out.
Well, we didn't really run that down all that far, so we can't.
And we don't really know.
No, I'm just saying. I'm just being hypothetical here. I'm just saying that what kind of form would freak you out? I think the insect form would freak me out
a little bit more. But the T-Rex, our guy said, "What was your reaction? I mean, what is it like looking at it at this type of reptilian?" And he says, "I'll give you a good description. Go to the zoo and go look at an alligator as close as you can." And imagine not having a glass or not having a cage.
Well, yeah. I mean, they freak me out.
I said, well, I asked him, I said, did you ever see the eyes? By the way, the eyes are vertical slits, okay? I said, did you ever see any lid bleed? He goes, and he said, he was like stunned. He goes, good question. I said, I spent all my time looking at those teeth.
Okay. I'm sorry, but there's an element of this, as much as, look, it can be legitimate, but there's an element of this which is still, for me, it's nonsensical because the powers that be are interacting with ET races. And there is information out there that even the Army is interacting with one group, the Navy with another, the Air Force with another, and so on and so forth. And you see, there is a power play going on that has to do with what's going on behind the scenes. And so contact for the general public, well, they're contacting individuals anyway. And there's just a huge backlog of that. It's great. If Obama wants to go on stage, look, we're going to be very happy. It's going to be a start.
That's going to be a problem for me because it's a manipulation. Everybody needs to get it. I can see it now, and I'm offering the devil's advocate version of manipulation.
But you can imagine that they'll also solve that aspect. I mean, in theory, if they're going to do something of that, of that level, then they're going to have figured out the worldwide issue, and they're going to have figured out exactly what you're talking about. And so there's no doubt about it. Not only the ETs who have very high intelligence who are going to be part of such an effort, but on top of it, the powers that be, even though they may have some limited intelligence from time to time in the way they behave, they certainly are going to have that figured out as well. In other words, it's not just going to be American TV. It's not, they'll figure out all the different ways. They could have simultaneous ships over cities. Again, Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke actually addresses that as well. Do you think Childhood's End, I'm sorry to cut you off, Carrie, do you think they may have gotten the idea from ET? Well, Arthur C. Clarke was part of the Illuminati, and so it's highly possible that he was in contact. There's many things in our story, okay, our source of story that jive with other stories out there. Yes. So we understand that. But we can only take what we know and what we've seen and what we've experienced with our guy. And I got to tell you, Bill and Carrie, that I think, and I believe this, he's telling the absolute truth. I think these experiences are absolutely real. I think that as we have learned some of this information and as we have discussed it and as we continue with this process, we think this program is absolutely real, and we're hopeful that some things will play itself out and that we'll learn even more things. Well, can I offer something here? Go ahead. This is a process. We're not at the end yet. I don't even know where we're at in the process. We're at a place in the process. Clay and I have been involved. We haven't been proprietary about our relationship with this guy. We've introduced him to other researchers. Credentials have been shown. He's met one researcher on a secure facility. That's Maccabee. You can say it, Maccabee. Sorry. This has been a process. This has been a process of sharing this guy's experience to as many people that can keep it within an information confine, but yet simultaneously try to validate his story. And this is an ongoing process.
And it must be implicit in this that this has the managers of this process, it has their sanction. Yes, it has, because, first of all, our security is because the information, first of all, is fantastic. It would be beyond the pale of public consumption, and in many respects, the UFO community has completely rejected it. So that insulates us. I'll give you an example, and we talked about security. Our guy, along with one of the Marines, we didn't talk to the Marine, but we talked to our guy. We were in touch back and forth, and they got approached and said, "We know you're talking to people," and they mentioned our names. And he said, "That's a violation of security." And the gentleman said to our guy, says, "Well, what are they worried about? No one's going to believe this story anyhow." Sure. I mean, it's impossible to prove. I know we can't prove it right now. Hopefully it can be proved in the future. That's what we're hoping for. But no one's going to believe you. So therein lies the security. That's the control. And the description of the being themselves is off-putting enough. It's out of the context of most UFO information. Yeah. But see, we're not worried about, but Bill, and I just want to point this out, guys. We're not worried about the lower tiers or the UFO community. We're worried about the tiers associated at that level of the working groups, the pro-disclosure, anti-disclosure, who know about this or realize there's competition. That's who they're worried about. Yeah, sure. Worried is in the war. Worried as in what? I mean, this guy is he is being allowed to go out and talk to you guys. Yes, within limits. Within limits, and we've been very careful to make sure that we stay within those limits. And we hope that trust has been built up where we learn more. And we're going to continue. Once things, I don't know if they cool down or they get hotter, I don't know, and we continue to release information. But I want to point something else out to you, and we didn't get into it very quickly. The Navy is in charge, okay? And I mean
the covert end of it. The Navy is in charge of ET policy.
We've heard of that.
The Air Force is in charge of contact and technology